The woman successfully helped her husband become president, becoming the first lady herself. Shortly after his election, he shockingly announced he wanted a divorce. Over the years, Cha Soo-yeon had meticulously planned to achieve her dream of becoming the first lady, hoping to elevate her husband to the presidency one day. 15 years earlier, she had focused on getting him into the National Assembly. A week before the election, her husband, Hyun-min Cheo, was negotiating labor issues at a factory when a fire broke out, injuring many, including him. Cha Soo-yeon, lightly injured, stayed by his side after waking up. His successful surgery, possibly aided by her prayers, saved his life, though he suffered a permanent leg injury. With the election a week away and his prospects dim, Cha Soo-yeon actively campaigned for him, promoting his ideals among the public. Her efforts paid off, and Hyun-min Cheo was elected to the assembly. 15 years later, she aimed to make him president. At the climax of a fiercely competitive election, with a narrow vote margin against another candidate, Hyun-min Cheo unexpectedly missed a crucial live TV debate. While his campaign team searched for him, he was in the morgue at a hospital, mourning a woman whose death deeply affected him. Fortunately, they found him, and after regaining composure, he delivered a powerful speech, sharing personal stories of sorrow and warmth, highlighting his wife's steadfast support. Additionally, he called on his opponent to join him in promoting a public safety bill, believing its passage would bring hope to the people and change to society. Hyun-min Cheo's heartfelt speech received thunderous applause. At home, Cha Soo-yeon had anticipated the election results and was selecting clothes and shoes fitting for a first lady. After years, her long-held wish was being fulfilled. She chose a white dress and red high heels, a combo that perfectly matched the first lady's dignified yet passionate image. As expected, Hyun-min Cheo won the election, reaching the pinnacle of power. However, Cha Soo-yeon's attention was drawn to the new, young stylist, Lee Hwa-jin. She scrutinized the lipstick Lee wore, tried it, and then returned it, saying such a color only suited naive girls like Lee. She subtly warned Lee to not touch things or people that weren't hers. Lee, unfazed, stared back at Cha Soo-yeon without apology. That night, Cha Soo-yeon headed to a square filled with her fans and supporters, where she and her husband were to give a victory speech. Yet, seeing her husband's huge campaign posters on the way, she remembered something else. Just the day before the election, she attended her daughter's school entrance ceremony as a parent. There, other parents praised her looks and eagerly asked for photos, hoping she would look after their children. Also attending the ceremony was Hyun-min Cheo's female secretary, a loyal chief of his campaign team. Her son and Cha Soo-yeon's daughter were classmates. In the classroom, Cha Soo-yeon quietly questioned the secretary about an unexplained cancellation of Hyun-min Cheo's schedule last week. Despite her request, the secretary had not provided any investigation results, causing Cha Soo-yeon to distrust her. During the ceremony, Cha Soo-yeon gave her daughter a bouquet. However, her daughter, Hyun-ji-ryu, was unhappy, knowing her mother attended the ceremony the day before the election to garner votes. Hyun-ji-ryu, tired of her mother's calculated ways, wanted to escape. On the ride back, Hyun-ji-ryu expressed her desire to study abroad, having received an interview invitation from an overseas art school. Cha Soo-yeon asked her to wait until after the election, prioritizing political interests over her daughter's wishes. Hyun-ji-ryu resented this family atmosphere, even claiming her parents' seemingly sincere campaign speeches were all lies. In a heated moment, Cha Soo-yeon slapped her daughter, who retaliated by revealing she had seen her father with another woman. Upon hearing of her husband's affair, Cha Soo-yeon was neither angry nor sad, but extremely calm, asking if anyone else knew. Hyun-ji-ryu, realizing her mother had known about the affair, was baffled at her mother's choice to ignore her husband's betrayal for the sake of her status as the First Lady. Cha Soo-yeon sternly reminded her daughter to keep the affair secret, highlighting the potential disaster a scandal could bring now that her husband was president. Seeing her daughter's defiant attitude, Cha Soo-yeon even pleaded with her to forget what she had seen. Now, recalling the previous day's events, Cha Soo-yeon maintained a clear mind and measured confidence as she entered the square filled with shouting fans who saw her as an idol and pillar of strength. With a practiced smile and dressed in her white dress, she moved through the crowd, shaking hands with one supporter after another. Moments later, Hyun-min Cheo met his wife amidst the crowd. Unaware of the impending crisis, Cha Soo-yeon had prepared a video for the pre-speech display on the plaza's large screen. It showed her husband rebuilding his life after the factory fire, with her constant support and encouragement. The video, documenting their deep bond, ignited enthusiastic applause from the fans. Cha Soo-yeon hugged her husband tightly as they reached the pinnacle of their journey. Suddenly, she noticed a man in the crowd throwing a tomato at Hyun Min Cheo. Without hesitation, Cha Soo-yeon shielded her husband. The man, a former factory worker, accused them of causing a colleague's death, branding them murderers. Wearing her red high heels, Cha Soo-yeon stepped over the smashed tomato and confronted the man, who spat at her and was dragged away shouting threats. Her protective act won the crowd's admiration once again. Amidst cheers, Cha Soo-yeon, smiling, held her husband's arm and kissed him on camera as the fans requested. But she could never have anticipated that after the kiss, her husband would suddenly ask for a divorce. Shocked, she heard the word divorce from him but remained calm, firmly stating she would not consider it. Hyun Min Cheo was utterly disappointed with her reaction. Since the incident, she hadn't even inquired why he wanted a divorce, only opposing it outright, which he could no longer tolerate. On the ride back, Hyun Min Cheo repeatedly complained to his secretary about his wife. Their marriage of 20 years had become unbearable for him, even to the point where he could not stand drinking the water she prepared. At this moment of crisis for Cha Soo-yeon, their daughter Hyun Ji-ryu was also rebelling. At home, Hyun Ji-ryu was fixated on a necklace that belonged to her close friend, Lee Hwa-jin. Once inseparable like sisters, their relationship had soured over an incident. That evening, Hyun Ji-ryu caught Lee Hwa-jin sneaking into their house and searching her mother's closet in the dark. When confronted, Lee Hwa-jin admitted she was looking for her lost necklace. Hyun Ji-ryu questioned why her necklace was in their house, to which Lee could not provide an answer but realized Hyun Ji-ryu had found it. Lee demanded it back, but Hyun Ji-ryu refused, and the argument led to both girls tumbling down the stairs. Cha Soo-yeon, upon hearing of her daughter's accident, rushed to the hospital. Fortunately, her daughter's injuries were not severe. In the hospital room, Cha Soo-yeon brought up a bill to her husband. As soon as he became president, Hyun Min Cheo had prioritized this bill, which was related to the factory fire 15 years ago. He aimed to uncover the truth and seek justice for the affected workers. However, Cha Soo-yeon viewed the fire as a thing of the past. She believed politics should focus on the present and future, not dwell on old events. Unable to agree with her perspective, Hyun Min Cheo, now the highest authority as president, was determined to change the unfortunate state of affairs. Cha Soo-yeon shifted the conversation to their daughter, arguing that her husband should never have let their daughter discover his affair. At that moment, Hyun Ji-ryu woke up and confronted her father about his infidelity, producing Lee Hwa-jin's necklace as evidence. She had witnessed her father's indiscretion with Lee in the closet and found the necklace that night. Hyun Min Cheo attempted to explain, but Hyun Ji-ryu didn't believe him. Instead of arguing further, he asked for the necklace back, wanting it returned to Lee. Hyun Ji-ryu, infuriated, threw the necklace to the ground, unable to accept her father anymore. Inappropriately, Hyun Min Cheo chose that moment to announce his intention to divorce Cha Soo-yeon. Cha Soo-yeon took her husband outside, agreeing to a temporary separation but firmly ruling out divorce. She believed that without her, his presidency would be unstable. Hyun Min Cheo mentioned an investigation into a Mr. Yang, with whom Cha Soo-yeon allegedly had a symbiotic relationship involving political funds. The current president was intensifying the investigation due to dissatisfaction with the bill Hyun Min Cheo was pushing. Cha Soo-yeon realized her husband wanted a divorce to distance himself from her to facilitate the bill's passage. She urged him to abandon the bill, suggesting that doing so would solve all their problems. However, Hyun Min Cheo was determined to see the bill succeed, even at the expense of their marriage. Cha Soo-yeon suspected that the divorce might not only be about the bill, but also involved Lee Hwa-jin. Hyun Ji-ryu felt it unfair for her mother, who had worked so hard to support her husband's presidential ambitions. Tears fell as she contemplated her parents' looming divorce, something she had never expected to happen. Cha Soo-yeon assured her daughter she would not divorce, no matter what. The butler called to report that Lee Hwa-jin, staying in the neighboring hospital room, had left the hospital without notice. Cha Soo-yeon hurried downstairs to look for her but slipped and fell on the stairs. She took off her red high heels due to the fall and continued to the parking lot with a bruised leg. There, she saw her husband talking to someone and promising to end his relationship with his wife. To her dismay, the person he was speaking with was Lee Hwa-jin. Under security escort, the soon-to-be president Hyun Min-cheo visited a noodle shop run by a grandmother, a familiar face and a longtime donor to the orphanage. Hyun Min-cheo and many factory workers came from that orphanage, viewing the grandmother as family. He cherished the memories of time spent with her and his fellow orphans. The previous day, the deceased he visited in the hospital was an aunt from the orphanage who had cared deeply for him. He remembered her bright smile and the devastating fire that changed everything. While he was talking to the grandmother, a lawyer interrupted. The lawyer referred to the man who threw a tomato at Hyun Min-cheo the day before, a former co-worker and someone close to the grandmother. The man had been arrested, and the lawyer, also from the orphanage and supported by the grandmother, hoped to negotiate his release. However, Hyun Min-cheo did not continue the topic but instead asked the grandmother to serve the lawyer a bowl of noodles. After eating, as usual, she handed Hyun Min-cheo a bottle of milk and reminded him not to use his power to protect friends. The lawyer was puzzled why the grandmother did not plead with Hyun Min-cheo, who could have easily ordered the man's release with just a word. Surprisingly, behind the scenes, the grandmother spoke ill of Hyun Min-cheo, stating he had not yet paid for his crimes. She even scattered rice at the doorstep, hoping to dispel the misfortune Hyun Min-cheo brought. Meanwhile, Hyun Min-cheo had established his own transition team. However, during an interview with reporters, a delivery truck suddenly arrived, bringing several boxes. One reporter quietly approached and snapped a photo, discovering a document that appeared to be a divorce agreement, with Cha Soo-yeon listed as the sender. This immediately caused a media frenzy, igniting a scandal about the presidential couple's divorce. At the same time, Cha Soo-yeon was at the hospital for her daughter's follow-up appointment. When news of the media blockade reached her, she immediately attempted to escape the hospital with her daughter. However, the reporters, relentless in their pursuit, followed by car. For both political reasons and to protect her daughter, Cha Soo-yeon sped up, and unexpectedly, a car accident occurred. To avoid reporters, Cha Soo-yeon and her daughter were in a car accident. During the accident-induced coma, Cha Soo-yeon remembered her childhood. As a child, her mother faced similar pursuits by reporters who suspected her mother of being an affair partner of a candidate and Cha Soo-yeon as his illegitimate daughter. Despite her mother's efforts to protect her, reporters broke into their home and harassed them. The same happened after the accident when reporters swarmed Cha Soo-yeon and her daughter, taking photos aggressively. Fortunately, their injuries were minor. After treatment, Cha Soo-yeon, fueled by determination, went to her husband Hyun Min-cheo's office. In the office, Hyun Min-cheo brought up divorce, suggesting it to avoid a scandal. But Cha Soo-yeon returned the divorce papers, expressing her desire to keep the marriage. She asked him to reconsider their 20 years together. However, Hyun Min-cheo was unyielding. Heartbroken, Cha Soo-yeon left and discovered from the secretary that he had exposed the divorce papers to the media. To protect her status as First Lady, Cha Soo-yeon contacted a renowned TV journalist and appeared on a show. She clarified her relationship with Hyun Min-cheo, emphasizing their mutual support over their marriage, and accused him of betrayal after his election. She stated her intent to protect her family as a devoted wife and mother. Unexpectedly, the reporter suddenly mentioned Cha Soo-yeon receiving substantial political funds from President Yang. Cha Soo-yeon was surprised as she had specifically requested not to discuss President Yang when she arranged to appear on the program. The reporter had agreed, but now betrayed her by pressing her on live TV. Cha Soo-yeon tried to stay calm, but a breaking news segment aired, announcing that Hyun Min-cheo had filed criminal charges against her for violating privacy laws by planting listening devices in his pen and thermos over 20 years. The reporter grilled Cha Soo-yeon about the eavesdropping, suggesting it led to their marital breakdown. Visibly shaken, Cha Soo-yeon admitted to the eavesdropping, stating it was to protect her husband, a politician. She emphasized her dual role as his wife and political partner. The reporter fiercely contested her justification, accusing her of making excuses. Realizing the situation was against her, Cha Soo-yeon did not argue further and hurriedly ended the broadcast. In the parking lot, reporters had already surrounded her. She ran, and a man waved her into his car. He introduced himself as Attorney Kang, who had defended a man from a tomato factory and was seeking Cha Soo-yeon's leniency for his client. Unwilling to engage, she left the car and took a taxi, but Kang insisted he would not give up. Meanwhile, Cha Soo-yeon's daughter, Hyun-ji-ryu, had her stitches removed at the hospital, where she saw a mother and daughter, reminding her of her own childhood. Hyun-ji-ryu wished for those happier times, but seeing the news of her mother on the show and hearing people's comments, she could only smile bitterly. In fact, the reporter's actions on today's show were orchestrated by Hyun Min-cheo's secretary. The secretary set up the discovered listening devices in front of Hyun Min-cheo, suggesting that he sue his wife on various charges. However, Hyun Min-cheo became angry. He sought divorce to protect, not harm, his wife and definitely did not want to see her jailed. He firmly told his secretary to stop, unwilling to see similar tactics used again. To Hyun Min-cheo, the divorce was not a betrayal nor for political gain, but a silent way to protect his wife. Currently, the sitting president is investigating the alleged benefits transferred between President Yang and Cha Soo-yeon. Hyun Min-cheo knows the president's ultimate target is him, not his wife, so he cannot push her to the edge. He believes divorcing and distancing himself from Cha Soo-yeon is the best protection for her. Yet, the situation seems to be spiraling out of control, and Hyun Min-cheo is anxious, unsure of the best course of action. Cha Soo-yeon returns home, where reporters also crowd the entrance. She goes straight inside and immediately vomits. Normally strong, she now cries and lies in bed all day, not eating or drinking, seemingly having lost her resolve. After not eating or drinking for several days, Cha Soo-yeon finally managed to get up from her bed. Her phone was flooded with missed calls and messages from the media. Looking at her disheveled reflection in the mirror, Cha Soo-yeon's memories took her back to her childhood when she witnessed her mother being fatally stabbed. Recalling that moment, she smashed the mirror in front of her and changed her expression to one of determination, vowing not to end up like her mother. That night, Cha Soo-yeon regained her resolve to keep fighting and visited a law firm for professional advice on her divorce. She stated that her husband's presidency owed much to her efforts, and she deserved half of everything he had gained. The lawyer advised against divorce, warning that she would lose all privileges of being the first lady. Given the circumstances, the lawyer suggested she counter her husband's claims aggressively. Cha Soo-yeon was resolute not to give up, even though it was a tough battle. However, after receiving a call, the lawyer abruptly dropped her case. Cha Soo-yeon suspected her husband's interference and sought other lawyers. After several attempts, no lawyer was willing to take her case, leaving her deeply frustrated as if all exits were blocked. Adding insult to injury, she received a call from her daughter's teacher about her daughter getting into a fight at school. The truth was, her classmates had provoked Hyun-ji-ryu by mocking her mother as a dethroned queen, which led to her outburst. Cha Soo-yeon visited the school to apologize on behalf of her daughter to the student and their parents who were hit. However, the parents insisted on expelling Hyun-ji-ryu. At this point, the school's chairman, Cha Jeong-ryeon, who is Cha Soo-yeon's half-brother and Hyun-ji-ryu's uncle, intervened and settled the issue. Cha Jeong-ryeon is the son of Cha Soo-yeon's father's legal wife. While resolving the matter, Cha Jeong-ryeon also advised Cha Soo-yeon to quickly settle her divorce with Hyun Min-cheo. Cha Soo-yeon realized her husband was pushing for divorce, even using their daughter as leverage. However, she was only partially correct. Hyun Min-cheo did contact Cha Jeong-ryeon, but only to ensure his daughter was taken care of, not to pressure his wife. The next day, during a lunch meeting attended by Hyun Min-cheo and a defeated presidential candidate from another party, secretaries from both sides whispered about Cha Soo-yeon's scandal of eavesdropping on her husband. It was revealed that Cha Soo-yeon's father had once arranged for someone to monitor her, and she had turned the tables by having her watchers spy on her husband instead. After the press conference, Hyun Min-cheo privately spoke with Miss Before Anyone Else, his former electoral rival, inviting her to become the prime minister in a bipartisan cabinet. To show his sincerity, he planned to place members of Miss Before Anyone Else's party in charge of public institutions. Miss Before Anyone Else initially refused, suspecting this was a diversion from his divorce controversy. Hyun Min-cheo promised benefits to Miss Before Anyone Else, and openly stated his hope to collaborate with her to pass legislation quickly with her support. He shared that his motivation in politics, leading to his presidency, stemmed from a factory accident that injured a co-worker, which was unfairly blamed on the individual. Moved by Hyun Min-cheo's dedication and honesty, Miss Before Anyone Else eventually agreed to cooperate. At a press conference, Miss before anyone else stated to reporters that she is actively considering forming the next government with Hyun Min-cheo and is currently facilitating related legislative agreements. Hyun Ji-ryu, her daughter, is packing to go study abroad soon. Cha Soo-yeon noticed her daughter wasn't wearing the necklace she had given her. Hyun Ji-ryu suspected that the necklace might have been stolen by stylist Lee Hwa-jin, who had been rummaging through her house that night. However, the stylist reported that Lee Hwa-jin had suddenly resigned. Complicating matters, Cha Soo-yeon received numerous messages from reporters who were aware of Hyun Ji-ryu assaulting a classmate at school, as the video had inexplicably been leaked. Soon, the entire city had seen the video, leading to widespread criticism of the president and his family online. Caught in a media storm, Hyun Min-cheo contacted his secretary to find out more. The secretary discovered that someone had hacked into the girl's cloud storage to access the video. Hyun Min-cheo asked his staff to try to take down the video, but they advised him to issue a national public apology to preempt further escalation of the situation. Despite agreeing, Hyun Min-cheo decided not to rush into a press conference but to wait for the right moment. Later, Hyun Min-cheo contacted his secretary again, questioning her involvement in the video leak, as it concerned his daughter's future. He threatened to hold her accountable if she was behind it. The secretary denied any involvement but hinted that it might be related to Cha Jong-ryeon, who wanted the position of Minister of Education in exchange for covering up the video incident. The secretary promised to handle the situation, but Hyun Min-cheo sternly reminded her to only act as a messenger and not make decisions like before. Though the secretary agreed outwardly, she was secretly colluding with Cha Jong-ryeon. In the evening, Cha Jong-ryeon contacted Cha Soo-yeon, who mentioned that her daughter's plans to study abroad were compromised due to the negative impact of the video, causing the school to withdraw its recommendation letter. Later, when Cha Soo-yeon met with Cha Jong-ryeon, he suggested that if she wanted her daughter to go abroad smoothly, she would need to sign the divorce papers. Cha Soo-yeon believed this was her husband's tactic to force her into divorce by pushing their daughter to the brink. Seeing Cha Soo-yeon's hesitation, Cha Jong-ryeon then contacted a reporter, threatening to leak the school incident, and deliberately stated in front of Cha Soo-yeon that he planned to go on a show. For her daughter's future, Cha Soo-yeon felt compelled to compromise and eventually agreed to the divorce. The next day, with the divorce papers in hand, Cha Soo-yeon had a final negotiation with her husband. Before signing, she asked the secretary and lawyer to leave so she could speak privately with her husband. Alone, she reminisced about their first meeting at an election support event 20 years ago. Cha Jong-ryeon, as the legitimate son, was pushed by their father into a high position as a candidate for parliament. In contrast, Cha Soo-yeon, despite managing her brother's campaigns and doing much political work behind the scenes, was never given due recognition because she was an illegitimate daughter. All the glory went to Cha Jong-ryeon, who had mocked her ambitions in politics and called her a mere helper. At that event, Hyun Min-cheo criticized their father's actions as a legislator and condemned then-President Yang as a shameful heir. He accused Cha Jong-ryeon of serious offenses like drunk driving and assaulting an officer, urging the audience to vote for him, vowing to change the city and fight for workers' rights. While everyone else scoffed, Cha Soo-yeon approached him before he was dragged away, confidently stating she would vote for him and help him become a congressman. 20 years later, Cha Soo-yeon had elevated her husband to the presidency. She warned him that her strength was in making the impossible possible. After her speech, she tore up the divorce papers, declaring she could make or break her husband. Moreover, she vehemently stated that from now on, she would solely protect her daughter, Hyun Ji-ryu. Before leaving, she returned the signed pen to the lawyer and warned the secretary not to touch her daughter again, stating she would not be lenient. Cha Soo-yeon challenges her husband head-on, vowing to bring him down if he proceeds with the divorce. Her words remind Hyun Min-cheo of the past, when he first entered politics as a nobody and was fully supported by Cha Soo-yeon. She had told him that sincerity was his greatest weapon, emphasizing his humble beginnings and genuine connection with the common people, unlike other politicians who were all talk. Now, with more power in politics, both seem to have forgotten the sincere drive that propelled them forward. One day, Cha Soo-yeon's stylist meets with President Yang, bringing custom clothes for a special guest who turns out to be Cha Soo-yeon's own stylist, Lee Hwa-jin. The stylist is shocked to see Lee dressed exactly like Cha Soo-yeon when she appeared as the First Lady. After informing Cha Soo-yeon about seeing Lee at President Yang's mansion, they discuss the recent resolution of a troubling incident involving Hyun Ji-ryu. A key video evidence helped clear accusations against him, proving the alleged victim was actually the perpetrator in ongoing school incidents. Hyun Ji-ryu decides against studying abroad, urging his mother to pursue her own desires, including divorce if she wishes. Hyun Min-cheo, worried about the impact of the divorce on their daughter, contacts his half-brother Cha Jong-ryeon, only to learn that his secretary, who had a deal with Cha Jong-ryeon for a future position as Minister of Education, was behind leaking a video of Hyun Ji-ryu bullying a classmate. Shocked by his secretary's betrayal, Hyun Min-cheo immediately nullifies any agreements between his secretary and Cha Jong-ryeon. Reflecting on the past, Cha Jong-ryeon recalls how Cha Soo-yeon and President Yang once conspired against him, with even their father siding with Cha Soo-yeon and advising him to leave politics. Cha Jong-ryeon, who couldn't accept his father's arrangement and even suspected his father of killing his lover for political gain, watches as his father collapses from distress. Now, Cha Jong-ryeon swears to reclaim everything and ensure the downfall of both Cha Soo-yeon and Hyun Min-cheo. The next day, Hyun Min-cheo confronts his secretary, who admits her actions without regret, believing that sacrifices are necessary in battle, even if it means sacrificing his daughter to secure his presidency. The secretary argues that the legislation Hyun Min-cheo wants to push is also her goal. She recalls protesting alone with a sign after a factory fire years ago, and how Hyun Min-cheo had helped her without hesitation, even more passionately advocating for justice for the victims. Now, to ensure the legislation passes smoothly, Hyun Min-cheo is willing to divorce his wife, and the secretary had sworn to support him at all costs. Facing the nearly crazed secretary, Hyun Min-cheo finds he can no longer work with her and demands her resignation. However, just as he issues the dismissal, breaking news on TV shows Cha Soo-yeon's lawyer holding a press conference announcing the collapse of the divorce agreement and hinting at Hyun Min-cheo's extramarital affair, suggesting Cha Soo-yeon will counter-sue for misconduct. Seeing the news, the secretary panics and urges Hyun Min-cheo to reconsider her dismissal until after the situation is resolved. Unyielding, Hyun Min-cheo confirms the dismissal as final. Despite being fired, the secretary maintains her combative stance, vowing to continue her fight independently of Hyun Min-cheo. Attorney Kang holds the press conference instead of Cha Soo-yeon. In the evening, Attorney Kang visits Cha Soo-yeon's mansion for the first time. Pleased with Kang's performance that day, Cha Soo-yeon decides to hire him as her legal representative for her divorce case. In exchange, she commits to handling the legal issues of a factory worker who had thrown tomatoes at the president. She plans to launch a media battle, knowing that public opinion, especially concerning the president's extramarital affair, can be a powerful weapon. The next day, fans unhappy about Cha Soo-yeon's surveillance protests outside. Amidst the brewing media storm, Cha Soo-yeon approaches the fans in the pouring rain, kneeling and tearfully asking for forgiveness for her actions. Beyond apologizing, she instructs her butler to set up tents for the fans who braved the rain, calling them family and urging them to take shelter. Her sincere words move the fans, including a high school student who helps her up and wipes away her tears. This warm, familial atmosphere is witnessed by Attorney Kang from a distance. Soon after, Cha Soo-yeon fulfills her promise by leveraging her connections to release the man from prison. That day, Attorney Kang goes to pick up the man, who struggles to understand Kang's decision to work for Cha Soo-yeon. Kang clarifies that being Cha Soo-yeon's lawyer does not mean he sides with her. Instead, he intends to take severe revenge against the couple. After speaking, Attorney Kang and the man go to pay respects at the grave of Tae-hoon, who died in a factory fire years ago and was the direct reason why Hyun Min-cheo wanted to push for a new bill. At the cemetery, they find an elderly woman cleaning Tae-hoon's tombstone, which has been vandalized with slanderous graffiti. Some still believe Tae-hoon was responsible for the fire, a misconception Attorney Kang also held in the past. Only recently did he learn the truth from the man and the elderly woman, realizing his parents, who died in the same fire, were not victims of Tae-hoon, but of the tragedy itself. All his actions, including getting close to Soo-yeon, have been driven by a desire for revenge. While at his parents' grave, Kang receives a call from Cha Soo-yeon, who claims to have gathered undeniable evidence against her husband. She instructs Kang to think carefully about how to use this evidence to effectively bring down Hyun Min-cheo. Kang is aware that no matter the outcome of the lawsuit, both Cha Soo-yeon and Hyun Min Cheo will be damaged. Yesterday, Cha Soo-yeon learned from the stylist that Lee Hwa-jin was invited as a special guest to President Yang's villa, who is currently imprisoned for illegal inheritance issues. She suspects that President Yang is using Lee Hwa-jin as a bargaining chip, knowing she is the president's mistress, to protect himself by threatening her. Cha Soo-yeon devises a new plan to meet with the current president's wife, the sitting first lady, who is performing a dishwashing act for show. Cha Soo-yeon joins her in the kitchen, wearing an apron and washing dishes together. Initially, the First Lady wants to keep her distance from Cha Soo-yeon until she produces a box containing a tape recording of a conversation involving the current president from years ago. Realizing Cha Soo-yeon's threatening approach, the First Lady is forced to change her attitude towards her. Back at the Blue House, the First Lady urges the president to stop the investigation against President Yang. She knows that the president's investigation is aimed at securing leverage to avoid imprisonment after his term. However, the recording Cha Soo-yeon provided, capturing the president's remarks after the factory fire years ago, contains secrets that must never be revealed. With no other options, the presidential couple agrees to meet with Cha Soo-yeon. Cha Soo-yeon warns that if the recording is released, the president's career will be over. The president adds that if the scandal goes public, Cha Soo-yeon will also lose her benefits, and her husband Hyun Min Cheo's political career will end as well. Undeterred, Cha Soo-yeon points out that while the current president might never recover from such a downfall, her younger husband could still have time to rebuild his career after a setback. Faced with Cha Soo-yeon's blunt threats, the presidential couple is forced to compromise. Cha Soo-yeon's condition for silence is to end the investigation into President Yang. After striking a deal with Cha Soo-yeon, the First Lady meets with Hyun Min Cheo to advise him to withdraw the divorce lawsuit, noting that he cannot save both the special bill and his wife. Hyun Min Cheo, picking up hints from the First Lady's words, begins to suspect that the person hindering the bill all these years is not the current president, but his own wife. He calls Cha Soo-yeon to confront her about this, but she doesn't give a direct answer, stating she has already made her choice and now it's his turn to choose between her and the bill. Torn and unable to decide, Hyun Min Cheo steps out into the rain with an umbrella. As he stands there, he recalls a time years ago when he and his wife stood together under an umbrella, a time when there was far less scheming between them. Additionally, Hyun Min Cheo sees a heartwarming video of his wife kneeling and apologizing in front of her fans, realizing she is waging a public relations battle against him. To counteract this, his male secretary suggests that Hyun Min Cheo meet with the current president as soon as possible and visit the disaster area together to connect with the public more closely. After a brief consideration, Hyun Min Cheo quickly decides it's time to confront his wife head-on. He knows he must push forward both the issue with President Yang and the special bill. Later, Hyun Min Cheo contacts Miss before anyone else's secretary and learns the identity of the person who provided his wife with the surveillance equipment, a convenience store manager. Upon questioning, the man reveals his past as a police officer who was dismissed from service. 5 years ago, Cha Soo-yeon approached him for surveillance equipment, specifically requesting an outdated model that needed to be recycled, which he found odd at the time. Hearing this, Hyun Min Cheo decides to give the man a substantial reward in exchange for his help in investigating any deals between Cha Soo-yeon and the current president from 5 years ago. Hyun Min Cheo realizes that, despite sharing many years together, he does not truly know his wife. Although his secretary has been dismissed, he continues to assist the president covertly. The secretary uncovers that attorney Kang also comes from a family affected by the factory fire, which reminds him of past events. After the fire, to protect her husband's political future and prevent the public from blaming him, Cha Soo-yeon quickly decided to defame the injured co-worker, Tae-hoon, as the arsonist. Cha Soo-yeon knew a scapegoat was needed to prevent the incident from reaching her husband. After Tae-hoon was maligned, his grandmother and the man came forward to seek justice, both fully aware that Tae-hoon was merely a scapegoat. At that time, a man caused a disturbance outside Hyun Min Cheo's hospital room, accusing him of slandering Tae-hoon. The secretary blocked the man from entering, compelled by the need to protect Hyun Min Cheo's political future. She had no choice but to agree to Cha Soo-yeon's proposal. Now, more than the truth about the past fire incident, the secretary is focused on why attorney Kang took on Cha Soo-yeon's divorce case, and she is also concerned about Hyun Min Cheo's alleged affair. Cha Soo-yeon has claimed she will present irrefutable evidence of her husband's infidelity in court. The secretary does not yet know what evidence Cha Soo-yeon holds, but is aware of her suspicions about Lee Hwa-jin being the president's mistress. The secretary believes both people and material evidence can be fabricated. The key will be what Lee Hwa-jin herself says. To counterattack, the secretary decides to start with Lee Hwa-jin and instructs another of Hyun Min-cheo's secretaries to keep a close eye on attorney Kang. Currently, the transition team is abuzz with rumors about the president's affair. Everyone believes there must be some truth to the rumors, since Cha Soo-yeon mentioned her husband's infidelity. To help Hyun Min-cheo win this battle, the secretary urgently visits Lee Hwa-jin's home, only to be informed by a roommate that Lee Hwa-jin reportedly went to work at an all-inclusive place. The secretary is puzzled about Lee Hwa-jin's whereabouts. Cha Soo-yeon gifts her butler a new car. The butler worries about her, but Cha Soo-yeon remains as cheerful as ever, undeterred by any challenges ahead. Soon, Cha Soo-yeon contacts 3 legislators and miss before anyone else's secretary. These legislators had helped her block the special bill years ago. Now, sensing the secretary's ambitions, Cha Soo-yeon openly plans to cut her out and communicate directly with one of the legislators. Additionally, under Cha Soo-yeon's pressure, President Yang is released, and the investigation against him ends. On the day of his release, Cha Soo-yeon meets with him directly, bringing up Lee Hwa-jin. She had guessed President Yang summoned the stylist to inform her that Lee Hwa-jin was with him, but now he has hidden Lee Hwa-jin because he found out Cha Soo-yeon was searching for her. A nurse had informed President Yang that Lee Hwa-jin was pregnant, shocking Cha Soo-yeon. She confronts President Yang, wanting to know if the child is her husband's, but he refuses to answer. Lee Hwa-jin was at President Yang's villa but was stopped by security when she tried to leave. During the argument, she suddenly fainted. In the chaos, President Yang arrived with Cha Soo-yeon to see Lee Hwa-jin. Cha Soo-yeon checked her breathing, and finding she was still alive, had her taken to the hospital. Upon waking in the hospital, Lee Hwa-jin saw Cha Soo-yeon sitting in her room. Cha Soo-yeon brought up that Lee Hwa-jin was pregnant. To Cha Soo-yeon's surprise, Lee Hwa-jin knelt before her, pleading for help. Lee Hwa-jin had given a necklace to a friend to sell for money to help a friend who had lost some money, unaware that it was Cha Soo-yeon's daughter, Hyun Ji-ryu's, missing necklace. Lee Hwa-jin explained she didn't steal the necklace intentionally. Previously, while working as Cha Soo-yeon's stylist, she had seen Cha Soo-yeon give the necklace to her daughter, and envying its beauty, tried it on one night in Cha Soo-yeon's dressing room. However, she fainted from panic when Hyun Min-cheo unexpectedly came home. Hyun Min-cheo found her unconscious and bent down to check on her, just as Hyun Ji-ryu saw them and misunderstood the situation. When Lee Hwa-jin regained consciousness, unable to explain her actions, she pocketed the necklace, planning to return it later. She was later seen by Hyun Ji-ryu frantically searching the dressing room to put the necklace back. After hearing Lee Hwa-jin's explanation, Cha Soo-yeon realized she had misunderstood her husband, Hyun Min-cheo. There was no romantic involvement between him and Lee Hwa-jin. Despite this, Cha Soo-yeon was reluctant to help Lee Hwa-jin. Lee Hwa-jin then promised to do anything if Cha Soo-yeon would help her friend. This was the response Cha Soo-yeon hoped for. But Lee Hwa-jin's question lingered in her mind. Lee Hwa-jin had asked what it felt like to be a mother, expressing doubts about her ability to be a good mother due to her poor background and lack of education. Cha Soo-yeon, taken aback, then told her that being a mother doesn't require qualifications, but once you decide to have a child, you must not doubt yourself or make the child feel insecure. After answering, Cha Soo-yeon found herself in distress. Once, Cha Soo-yeon and her husband were deeply in love. One day, she discovered she was pregnant and, like Lee Hwa-jin, doubted her ability to be a good mother. Her doubts stemmed from the shadows left by her own mother. Cha Soo-yeon felt that if her mother had not had her out of wedlock, she would not have faced societal scorn or died tragically. At that time, her husband Hyun Min-cheo held her hand and comforted her gently. He always saw her caring nature towards him and believed she would be a loving mother. Encouraged by her husband, Cha Soo-yeon was deeply moved. Now, however, her situation has changed dramatically. Reflecting on the past brings her pain, but it also sharpens her resolve, readying her for battle. Cha Soo-yeon sent attorney Kang to the police station to take over the defense of Lee Hwa-jin's friend. Initially, the friend refused any legal help, until learning that Li Huajin had gone to great lengths to find this lawyer. Over the phone, Li Huajin urged her friend to follow the lawyer's advice. Attorney Kang promised Li Huajin that he would do his utmost to rescue her friend Young. In a conversation with Young, Attorney Kang brought up Young's past criminal record. Young was a minor when first incarcerated for theft and had refused any legal defense throughout the process. The lawyer's words reminded Young of the past. That time, he, Li Huajin, and another friend stole a motorcycle but encountered an accident on the road, injuring the friend. To protect Li Huajin, who was prone to fainting, Young decided to take the blame and subsequently refused legal help. While defending Young, Attorney Kang met Hyunmin Cheo's fired secretary at the police station, brought in by Li Huajin's close friend to help Young. Before they could discuss further, the secretary learned that Cha Soo-yeon was meeting with Hyunmin Cheo and sensed trouble. Indeed, at the meeting, Cha Soo-yeon's first words were about Li Huajin's pregnancy. She used this as leverage in negotiations with her husband, threatening to claim the child was Hyunmin Cheo's illegitimate child and expose him, which would disgrace him publicly. In exchange for her silence, Cha Soo-yeon wanted him to drop a special bill and allow her to return to her role as the First Lady. Hyunmin Cheo was undecided. Earlier that day, his daughter had contacted him, appealing to his emotions by reminiscing about their family's happier times, urging him not to divorce her mother and to restore their family. Her words initially swayed Hyunmin Cheo, who, despite being president, still cherished family ties. However, soon after, a former police officer, now conducting investigations for him, called. The investigation revealed that 5 years ago, Cha Soo-yeon had met with the current president and his wife, apparently reaching some agreement. From that time, Cha Soo-yeon began monitoring her husband using equipment bought from the former officer. Thinking back to his wife's recent statements on a TV show, Hyunmin Cheo began to suspect that her surveillance was not to guard against him, but to monitor the current president and his wife, aiming to protect him. The former police officer revealed that the current president's secretary had recorded all the insider details in a diary. Hyunmin Cheo asked the former officer to purchase this diary, believing it contained the truth he sought. After being fired, Hyunmin Cheo's secretary returned home, intending to be a good mother to her son. However, that night, Secretary Lim visited her. Frustrated, Lim wanted to collaborate with the secretary to bring down Cha Soo-yeon. He mentioned a recent proposal to Hyunmin Cheo about a bipartisan collaboration that could help advance a special bill. But Hyunmin Cheo hesitated. Displeased with his attitude, the secretary agreed to work with Lim. Lim mentioned an account book in Cha Soo-yeon's possession containing damaging information about the opposition party. The secretary vowed to acquire this book to regain her standing. Later, she confronted Hyunmin Cheo in the transition office, asserting that Cha Soo-yeon was fiercely obstructing the special bill. She claimed to have a way to get the bill passed but urged Hyunmin Cheo not to interfere and to remain steadfast in his political convictions. Hyunmin Cheo shared his difficulties, mentioning how his wife used Li Huajin to threaten him and stated he had never shied away from the complexities of politics but now needed some time. However, the secretary was relentless, appearing even more resolute than Hyunmin Cheo. After their talk, the secretary caused a scene in the transition office in front of the staff, proclaiming she would not back down and publicly challenging Hyunmin Cheo. This incident alarmed the rest of the party's senior leadership. With the vote on the special bill happening the next day, they could not afford internal strife. To prevent the secretary from revealing party secrets in her distraught state, the higher-ups contacted her with a conciliatory tone. Seizing the opportunity, the secretary expressed her hope that the party would remain united and not waver at a critical moment. Additionally, the secretary contacted a reporter and revealed the collaboration between Cha Soo-yeon and Li Huajin. The reporter, thrilled to get the exclusive, decided to investigate further at the police station. Although an agreement was reached, Cha Soo-yeon and Li Huajin did not trust each other. Li Huajin demanded that Cha Soo-yeon first find a way to rescue her friend Young, promising to fulfill her end of the deal afterwards. It turns out Young is the father of Li Huajin's unborn child. For the child's future peace of mind, Li Huajin needed to ensure Young's safety. Cha Soo-yeon, also distrusting Li Huajin, worried that Li Huajin might not keep her promise once Young was freed. Cha Soo-yeon even explicitly instructed Attorney Kang not to submit the petition or provide any real defense for Young until the divorce proceedings were withdrawn. However, Attorney Kang had his own ideas. For revenge, yesterday, Attorney Kang decided to collaborate with the president's secretary. The secretary confessed that her push for the special bill was not to help the president but to exonerate her husband, wrongly blamed for a factory fire years ago. She wanted to use the bill to punish the real culprits. She warned Attorney Kang not to underestimate the First Lady, Cha Soo-yeon, whose cunning far exceeded his understanding. If he truly wanted vengeance for his family, he should not just act submissively around Cha Soo-yeon, but join forces with her to push the bill forward. The secretary mentioned an account book hidden by Cha Soo-yeon, suggesting that it contained damaging information that could coerce the opposition party to vote for the bill. Convinced, Attorney Kang, without Cha Soo-yeon's knowledge, went to the hospital to meet Lee Hwa-jin and revealed Cha Soo-yeon's deception. Lee Hwa-jin disclosed to Attorney Kang that on the night she stole the necklace, she saw a safe in the dressing room and a button beneath a cabinet. Believing the account book was in the safe, Attorney Kang planned to steal it that night. After meeting with Cha Soo-yeon, he claimed he was hungry, and while the housekeeper was preparing food, he sneaked into the dressing room, found the button, and successfully discovered the wall-mounted safe. The safe was locked with a password, which Lee Hwa-jin suggested might be Cha Soo-yeon's daughter's birthday. Attorney Kang tried Hyun-ji Ryu's birth date, and it worked, opening the safe. Inside, besides the account book, there were numerous surveillance recordings against the opposition party. After stealing the book and recordings, unsure whether to trust the secretary, fearing she might use the account book for her own political gain after obtaining it. After much consideration, Kang chose to betray her and meet with President Hyun Min-cheo instead. This decision was influenced by Tomato Man, a former factory co-worker of Hyun Min-cheo named Mr. Yoon. Despite holding many grievances against Hyun Min-cheo since the factory fire incident, in the end, Mr. Yoon chose to trust his old friend. However, he reminded Hyun Min-cheo to act decisively on the special bill with the account book and recordings, rather than hesitating as in the past. Reflecting on the smiles of his old co-workers, Hyun Min-cheo's resolve hardened. Upon hearing the news, the secretary pleaded with Hyun Min-cheo to let her handle the negotiations with the opposition party using the materials. While Hyun Min-cheo was aware of the secretary's tactics and knew she would stop at nothing to threaten the opposition, this was not his desired approach. He wanted to advance the special bill, but only through legitimate means. The secretary continued trying to persuade Hyun Min-cheo. She shared that her husband had once dreamed of building a grand hotel on the land, but on the day of its completion, his workers' compensation claim was denied, and he was investigated for business misconduct. This was why she was so driven to push the special bill. However, no matter what the secretary said, Hyun Min-cheo refused to hand over the materials. It was out of gratitude to the secretary that he could no longer stand by and watch her perform any misdeeds on his behalf. The night he obtained the account book and recordings, the voices of his wife and co-workers mingled in his mind. Eventually, last night, the words of his old co-worker, Mr. Yoon, solidified his determination to take action this time. The next day was the day of the parliamentary session, where members were set to vote on the special bill. Hyun Min-cheo, carrying the crucial account book, headed to the parliament but unexpectedly got stuck in traffic. Getting out to check, he found a coarse work glove on the road, which reminded him of an incident years ago when a co-worker's hand got caught in machinery. Determined to seek justice for his co-workers, Hyun Min-cheo knew he had to reach Parliament on time. Unbeknownst to him, the traffic jam was deliberately orchestrated by President Yang to thwart the special bill. President Yang had ordered his aides to ensure the jam would hold Hyun Min-cheo back. Unexpectedly, Hyun Min-cheo swapped into a traffic police uniform and rode a police motorcycle to reach the Parliament. Before the vote, Hyun Min-cheo met privately with the opposition party, which was largely opposed to the special bill. He then spilled the contents of the account book and recordings on the floor. However, he chose not to use them as a threat, but instead gave a heartfelt speech, urging the opposition to make their decision based on personal conscience. While speaking, Hyun Min-cheo fought back tears as he expressed his convictions. For over 20 years, he had risen from a grassroots candidate to his current position, all to uncover the truth behind the factory fire and to deliver justice to those wronged. Due to Hyun Min-cheo's words, almost all the lawmakers changed their stance. They decided to vote in favor of the bill. Cha Soo-yeon grew anxious upon hearing the news. She contacted the lawmakers to try to stop them. She falsely claimed she had a copy of the ledger. But the lawmakers were no longer intimidated. If the ledger matter became public, the secret would no longer be a secret. They would no longer fear it. More importantly, the lawmakers were collectively convinced by Hyun Min Cheo. In this situation, if a few individuals intended to vote against it, they would instead face serious consequences. Thanks to Hyun Min Cheo's efforts, ultimately, the special bill he had been obsessed with for over 20 years passed with an overwhelming majority. Based on the bill, the truth about the factory fire years ago would finally come to light. That day, people at the transition office celebrated for Hyun Min Cheo. At that moment, Hyun Min Cheo had yet to realize that the real challenge and threat were about to come. In order to seek revenge for their parents who died in the factory accident, Attorney Kang partnered with Lee Hwa-jin. Following Attorney Kang's advice, Lee Hwa-jin signed a petition to secure her boyfriend's release and agreed to follow the lawyer's plan to appear on a program for an interview to expose Cha Soo-yeon's lie about being the president's mistress. Attorney Kang promised that once the interview was done, Lee Hwa-jin's boyfriend would be released. Additionally, Attorney Kang met with a reporter and handed them a seiyishu, which contained what Lee Hwa-jin would expose about Cha Soo-yeon during the interview. From now on, Attorney Kang stopped answering Cha Soo-yeon's calls. This meant he had fully taken Cha Soo-yeon's side against her. After meeting with the reporter, Attorney Kang went to the police station and handed over Lee Hwa-jin's signed petition and other materials, which were enough to prove her boyfriend had not committed theft. The day the documents were submitted coincided with the day the special bill passed. Attorney Kang was overjoyed. He became a lawyer for this very purpose, to ensure the bill's passage and avenge his parents. That day, Lee Hwa-jin arrived at the TV station, prepared to follow through with her agreement with Attorney Kang for the interview. Suddenly, Attorney Kang appeared backstage in the dressing room, admitting that he had deceived Lee Hwa-jin. In fact, the petition alone could secure Lee Hwa-jin's boyfriend's release. There was no need for the TV appearance. Attorney Kang admitted he had used Lee Hwa-jin. Convincing her to go on the program was actually for personal revenge, because he hated Cha Soo-yeon more than anything. After the factory fire incident years ago, Cha Soo-yeon had worked hard to cover up the truth. She had blamed an innocent person for the crime, causing him to wrongfully accuse them for a long time. However, even after hearing Attorney Kang's explanation, Lee Hwa-jin still did not want to cancel the appearance, because she too harbored a secret of her own. While Lee Hwa-jin was on the program, Hyun Min Cheo went home to meet his wife. Cha Soo-yeon demanded to know when her husband had aligned with Attorney Kang, and when he had become a thief stealing from his wife. Hyun Min Cheo agreed to answer all his wife's questions, but in exchange, he also needed her to answer him why she had so strongly opposed the special bill's passage. Cha Soo-yeon did not explain. She only claimed things were not as her husband thought. When she saw Lee Hwa-jin on the program, though she had made a deal with Lee Hwa-jin, she had not instructed her to contact the media. As the interview began, Lee Hwa-jin seemed frozen. The producer feared the program would fail. Thankfully, with the reporter's guidance, Lee Hwa-jin gradually calmed down. Finally, she revealed a shocking truth. She was Hyun Min Cheo's daughter. Everyone present, including the reporter, was stunned. In their shock, the reporter asked when Lee Hwa-jin had first learned this. Lee Hwa-jin answered honestly. It was on election day years ago. A co-worker who had worked with Hyun Min Cheo died in a car accident. Lee Hwa-jin came to attend the funeral. Hyun Min Cheo noticed the yellow scarf she wore. It belonged to his ex-girlfriend from years ago. That co-worker was Hyun Min Cheo's girlfriend before he met Cha Soo-yeon. Perhaps at that time, Hyun Min Cheo had already suspected Lee Hwa-jin's relation to him. That's why during the funeral, he asked Lee Hwa-jin to stay in the mourning hall for 3 days in place of the bereaved family. On the live TV program Now, Lee Hwa-jin said she hadn't had time to tell the president she was his daughter. Then she turned her accusation toward Cha Soo-yeon, exposing Cha Soo-yeon's plan to falsely claim she was the president's mistress. As Lee Hwa-jin gave her interview, Cha Soo-yeon's household erupted in chaos. Hyun Ji-ryu demanded answers from her parents. Faced with her daughter's questioning, neither Cha Soo-yeon nor Hyun Min Cheo could respond. Hyun Ji-ryu stormed out of the room. At that moment, she thought her parents were terrible. Cha Soo-yeon asked her husband when he had known this secret. Hyun Min Cheo said he had only suspected it, not at the funeral, but when Lee Hwa-jin stole from the closet that night. That day, he noticed she wore a ring pendant. He asked her to remove it and read the engraving inside. It was the engagement ring he had given his ex-girlfriend years ago. At first, Hyun Min Cheo had been uncertain, but later, he noticed Lee Hwa-jin often fainted, just like his co-worker, and according to doctors, it was a genetic condition. Hearing his explanation, Cha Soo-yeon became emotional. She couldn't accept that Lee Hwa-jin was her husband's daughter, but Hyun Min Cheo turned the question around. He had long suspected that when his ex-girlfriend left him, it was Cha Soo-yeon who drove her away. Even though she knew the ex-girlfriend was pregnant, Cha Soo-yeon avoided answering her husband's question. Instead, she demanded he take a paternity test. With the exposure of the illegitimate daughter, Hyun Min Cheo's reputation hit rock bottom. Protesters gathered, accusing him of moral corruption in his personal life, and demanding his immediate resignation. Facing demonstrations and media interviews, Hyun Min Cheo remained calm. He promised to take a paternity test, if Lee Hwa-jin agreed. However, he had no intention of stepping down as president. He emphasized his responsibility to the nation and its people, stating that protecting the newly passed special bill was his top priority. Yet his impassioned speech failed to achieve its intended effect. Instead, the public saw it as an attempt to cover up the illegitimate child scandal. Originally, the passing of the special bill infuriated President Yang. For him, it meant his deals with Cha Soo-yeon would soon be exposed. But now, the president's illegitimate child scandal gave President Yang a sense of opportunity. The chairman gloated, saying he had known about the illegitimate child 2 months ago, on the day Hyun Ji-ryu and Lee Hwa-jin were both hospitalized. At the time, both girls were found to have rare panda blood. That tiny probability made him suspect they were related. Now, President Yang planned to use this against Hyun Min Cheo. As long as the scandal kept growing, the lawmakers surrounding Hyun Min Cheo would turn against him. Hyun Min Cheo visited the memorial tower to pay respects to his ex-girlfriend. The pendant's ring was actually handmade by him. He had formally proposed to her before meeting Cha Soo-yeon. While he reminisced, the officer investigating his ex-girlfriend's accident arrived. The officer revealed that a car had been parked at the crash scene. Though the license plate was unclear, Hyun Min Cheo recognized it as his wife Cha Soo-yeon's vehicle. Shocked again, he began to suspect Cha Soo-yeon was the driver. Cha Soo-yeon met with Lee Hwa-jin. After a conversation, Lee Hwa-jin agreed to take the paternity test. But Cha Soo-yeon warned her, even if the test proved she was the president's daughter, Lee Hwa-jin shouldn't expect anything, neither money nor family recognition. With that, Cha Soo-yeon handed over the paternity test consent form for Lee Hwa-jin to sign. But at that moment, Lee Hwa-jin received a call from President Yang. The chairman warned her against taking the test, claiming Cha Soo-yeon was the killer of her mother. Lee Hwa-jin met with President Yang again. Naive in her thinking, she believed she could put Cha Soo-yeon in prison for hit and run. But President Yang informed her that the president had immunity. Even if Cha Soo-yeon was arrested, she'd be released with Hyun Min Cheo's word. And Lee Hwa-jin was the only one who could stop it. If the public learned about Hyun Min Cheo abandoning Lee Hwa-jin's mother and Cha Soo-yeon's actions against her, Hyun Min Cheo wouldn't be able to save Cha Soo-yeon. In exchange for his advice, President Yang cautioned Lee Hwa-jin not to rush into the paternity test. It would only benefit Cha Soo-yeon. President Yang insisted. He was doing this for Lee Hwa-jin's own good. He urged her to go on TV again, to expose Cha Soo-yeon completely. But in private, President Yang met with multiple lawmakers. He gave each a bottle of wine. Scanning the QR code on it would transfer 100 million won. He bribed them this way, demanding they investigate the president's illegitimate daughter, to bring Hyun Min Cheo into public scrutiny. Even though Hyun Min Cheo's inauguration was just a month away, President Yang still aimed to take him down. The media approached Lee Hwa-jin again, trying to persuade her to appear on another program. Lee Hwa-jin refused, stating she wasn't there for revenge and had never targeted Cha Soo-yeon. She had only gone on TV last time to find the hit-and-run driver, even if it wasn't Cha Soo-yeon. But the producer reminded Lee Hwa-jin that her mother's accident might involve the president as well. Perhaps Hyun Min Cheo knew about his wife's crime, or even colluded with her. After all, the accident happened during election week. For Hyun Min Cheo, eliminating his ex-girlfriend meant covering up the illegitimate child scandal. The producer wanted Lee Hwa-jin to go on TV again, believing more secrets about the first couple could be uncovered. Meanwhile, Cha Soo-yoon was summoned by police. Facing interrogation, Cha Soo-yoon finally broke her silence and requested a lawyer. She called in attorney Kang. With the lawyer present, Cha Soo-yoon still refused to answer any questions. Attorney Kang asked the officers to step aside so he could speak with Cha Soo-yoon privately. After the officers left, Cha Soo-yoon finally spoke up. She said she wouldn't hold attorney Kang accountable for deceiving her and stealing the ledger, but in exchange, she needed him to do one thing for her. What Cha Soo-yoon wanted was for attorney Kang to stop the housekeeper from turning herself in at all costs. It turned out, the housekeeper was the real driver in the accident years ago. Only then did attorney Kang realize Cha Soo-yoon had stayed silent to protect the housekeeper, even taking the blame for her. The housekeeper tearfully said she had worked for Cha Soo-yoon for over 40 years. To her, Cha Soo-yoon was more than a daughter. She couldn't bear to see Cha Soo-yoon take the fall for her. Moved by her words, attorney Kang relented and agreed to take her to see Cha Soo-yoon at the police station. But on the way, a sudden car crash occurred. Attorney Kang and the housekeeper were thrown from the vehicle. The crash was orchestrated by President Yang. President Yang had long bribed Cha Soo-yoon's driver. Hyun Min Cheo visited his former co-worker and poured out his heart. Though he had worked tirelessly to push through the special bill, he had gradually become the calculating, scheming politician he once despised. He spoke of his ex-girlfriend, how he would always remember her smile, and the photo she took of him and his co-workers. Gazing at the old photo, familiar yet distant, tears streamed down Hyun Min Cheo's face. Afterwards, Hyun Min Cheo went to meet Attorney Kwon at his office. He invited Attorney Kwon to chair the Special Investigation Committee to look into the factory fire years ago. It was the same Attorney Kwon who had represented the factory in court before. He nearly lost his license for helping workers fight against the powerful elite. Now, Hyun Min Cheo wanted Attorney Kwon's help, but Attorney Kwon warned him if the investigation expanded, Cha Soo-yoon might be implicated. Would Hyun Min Cheo still want him to take the position when his wife's safety was at stake? Hyun Min Cheo hesitated. Soon, a subordinate reported that Cha Soo-yoon was being questioned about the hit-and-run case. Hyun Min Cheo rushed to the police station. The subordinate reminded him that journalists had surrounded the station. Going now would only worsen the situation and trap him in media scrutiny. But despite knowing the risks, Hyun Min Cheo insisted on going. Facing the reporters' questions, he asked them to avoid speculation. He emphasized his visit wasn't to pressure police or influence the investigation. He just wanted to stay by his wife's side. When asked whether he'd resign if Cha Soo-yoon was linked to the hit-and-run, Hyun Min Cheo fell silent. Then his beautiful secretary suddenly appeared. She claimed that she, not the first couple, was the real driver in the accident.